If you've been following Alex and Autos for any length of time, then you know that I love gadgets and I love new technology. And this 2015 BMW i3 is probably the biggest gadget you can buy today, short of the BMW i8. The i3 we're taking a look at right here is available as an EV only or as a serial hybrid, or as BMW likes to call it, an electric vehicle with a range extender. The legal distinction is a little bit important because in the state of California, this is the only range extending EV currently on sale. This car will use its battery up until it has only about 6% left, and then it will engage the range extender. Again, there is an EV only version available that doesn't have that gasoline engine in it. That's not going on in the ELR or the Chevy Volt. You can actually turn on or off the gasoline engine whenever you want to via the software in those vehicles. In addition, the Volt and the Cadillac Elr will operate as a serial hybrid or as a parallel hybrid, depending on what's most efficient at the time. A parallel hybrid, the gasoline engine and the electric motors are both driving the vehicle at the same time. In this vehicle, it is not possible for the very small engine in the back to power the wheels directly, and that is possible in the ELR or the Volt. Up front, we have kind of a different look for BMW. The i3 is a very modern, almost concept car looking car. We still have the BMW kidney grille up here, but it's not for cooling. All the cooling is done down low in this vehicle. Cooling demands in EVs are very low, and even though this does have a range extender in it, cooling demands are still much lower than your average vehicle. Up here you'll find BMW's adaptive LED headlamps, and these are not fog lights. These are actually the high beams. These are halogen high beams in our i3 model that we're testing. No modern BMW would be complete without angel eyes, and we get a reimagined version of that with this LED strip running right there along the bottom of the headlamp. By designing the i3 from the ground up to be an electric vehicle, BMW freed themselves from normal vehicle constraints. So even though this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, we don't have a long hood up front because the motor is actually in the back, not in the front. At 157 inches long, the i3 is not a terribly long vehicle. It is 6 inches longer than a Mini Cooper, however, it's a full 2 feet shorter than a BMW 328i sedan. The side profile is also very modern right over here. I'm actually seeing a little bit of the 2015 Nissan Murano in this design, or perhaps I'm seeing a little bit of this design in the 2015 Nissan Murano. These are huge wheels. These are 19 or 20-inch wheels, depending on the model that you get. And you notice something else going on here. We have this very low greenhouse in the back, but you'll notice we don't have a door handle. And that's because we do have rear suicide doors right here. They open on the side with the front door, and then there's a separate handle for the rear suicide door. At the rear of the vehicle, we have these body-colored panels and these black panels all meeting. This is actually a glass panel right across the back of the tailgate. So we get our usual tailgate hatch glass right up here that you see through, and this section is just a glass piece to make it look very finished. These lights are actually behind that glass panel. We have the tail lamp and brake lamps here, and then these are the turn signals. From this angle, you're probably noticing something unusual. These tires look awfully narrow, and that's because they are narrow. They're 175 width tires in the back, and the fronts are even narrower at 155 width. That's made possible because the i3 in both versions is incredibly light. The EV only weighs 2,634 pounds, and that's only a cupcake shy of the Mazda MX-5 with the automatic transmission. It's a very, very light vehicle. This version right here with the range extending engine in it is only 2,899 pounds, still incredibly light. If we pop the hood, you'll notice something right away. This isn't actually a hood, it's a front trunk or a frunk, depending on what you want to call it. In here, we actually have a small storage vault. This is where you will find the emergency charger or the level 1 EVSC stored right in there. This is also where you'll find the tire inflator kit and the can of Fix-A-Flat. Although this has a frunk like the Tesla, it is much smaller than the Tesla's frunk, and it also is not necessarily watertight. Now, the goal of this is not to have water streaming into it, but I was driving around in mist and I did notice that this does get a little bit damp inside. There are drain holes in the bottom to keep it well drained, but you don't want to put anything up front that you can't afford to get wet. I can't show it to you because it's under a panel in the cargo area, and BMW has asked me very nicely to not dismantle their vehicle. But under the cargo area, you will find the electric motor and the range extending unit. The electric motor produces 170 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. You'll notice that number is much higher than the mass market EVs out there. So this produces much more power than the Leaf, the Ford Focus EV, or the Kia Soul EV. That electric motor is powered via a 22 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack positioned low under the vehicle. Of that 22 kilowatt-hours, 18.8 are usable to the end user. The reason they do that is to extend battery life. So by using only the middle portion of the battery, never fully discharging it and never fully charging it, they can make that battery last longer. Right back here where you would normally find a gas filler port is where we have the charging port. This vehicle has a 7.4 kilowatt-hour charger, which will draw about 32 amps at level 2. That is one of the bigger chargers available in this category of EV. You will find faster chargers, of course, in a Tesla Model S. Charging times will vary, and BMW fortunately lets you vary the rate on a level 1 charger, which is a really nice feature because you can't do that in most of them. Something like a Chevy Volt, you can choose between 8 or 12 amps only. Some of those other vehicles out there you can't choose at all, and this vehicle allows you to choose between 8, 12, and 16. Although that may not sound like a lot, if you're charging at 16 amps versus 12 amps, this will go about 15 miles further over an 8-hour charge, so it does make a big difference. If you have access to a level 2 charger, or if you install one in your home and you can charge at 32 amps, charging will take only 3 hours. And if you have access to a DC quick charge and your i3 is so equipped, you can go from 0 to 80% in only 20 minutes. Now we're taking a look at the range extending model, and that means right back here next to the electric motor we have a 0.65 liter 2-cylinder engine. BMW has a long history of making 2-cylinder motorcycle engines, and they're really building on that with this range extending engine. The intention of this system is that you drive electric only, and then only once you hit that about 6% mark, that range extending unit will kick in and it can provide power to drive the vehicle forward. There's been a lot said about how well that range extending unit works, and we'll go into that in more depth later in this video. Now, one very important consideration is that this vehicle does use an electric heat pump to both heat and cool the vehicle. Even if you get the range extending model, it is not capable of using the waste heat from the engine to help heat the vehicle. So your range will be a little bit more limited, and your mileage will be a little bit more limited when running on gasoline if you live in a very cold climate. Behind door number 2, you will find the gasoline fill-up nozzle, which is a little bit different than most vehicles since this is up front, not in back. Whereas other plug-in vehicles, the electric charge port is up front and the gasoline port is out back. There are 2 important things to know about the range extending i3. The first is this uses premium gasoline. It doesn't use regular unleaded. That's due to that 2-cylinder engine in the back and getting the most performance out of the smallest engine. The other thing is that this tank is relatively small. It's only about 1.9 gallons or so. I drained it almost all the way and was able to squeeze 1.7 gallons in it. It means that your fill-ups will be very inexpensive, but your range on gasoline is going to be somewhere between 60 and 80 miles, depending on how you drive the car. Front seat comfort comes in at 7 out of 10 points. You'll notice the attention to weight savings in this vehicle right here in the seat back. It's not as thick or as thickly padded as you'll find in something like a BMW 3 Series. We also don't have the same range of motion in this driver's seat, and we don't have an adjustable lumbar support. We do, however, still get a tilt telescopic steering column with a decent range of motion. Getting people in and out of the vehicle is made very easy by these large door openings. Of course, we have both doors open right now, and you'll notice that the seatbelt for the driver and the front passenger are actually attached to this third door, so you do need to unbuckle to let people in. But it does mean that getting in the back is very easy. And if I sit here behind myself, I have a surprising amount of room for a vehicle this size, especially headroom. I have about 1.5 inches of headroom sitting relatively upright in this back seat. Now the seat bottom cushion is a little bit close to the floor for my tastes, and I have about 1 inch of legroom sitting right here behind myself. If I scoot over to the right side of the vehicle, I have only about 1/2 inch left because this front seat is all the way back in its tracks. An important thing to keep in mind about the i3 is that this is a 4-seat vehicle only. There is no center seat back here. The rear seat backs do recline, but this is mostly to square off the cargo area. It's a 2-position mechanism. This is the most upright and least comfortable, and then this is the furthest back and most comfortable. By leaning them forward that way, you can fit a 26-inch roller bag in the same position that this 24-inch roller bag is in the trunk. Compact hatchbacks are usually very practical for cargo handling, and that is the same for the BMW i3. Right back here we have 12 cubic feet of cargo space behind the rear seat backs. You can expand that by folding them forward and stuff cargo all the way to the front seat backs. Those rear seats do fold completely flat. You also get a little bit of extra storage room, as I said, if you put those rear seats in their least comfortable position. I have a 26-inch roller bag in here, and you can see you can just barely fit this back here and still close the hatchback. Unfortunately, however, we cannot fit this 24-inch roller bag in this position if the tonneau cover is in the vehicle. It will fit completely back here if you do remove the tonneau cover, but then you'd have to leave it somewhere. Starting at our interior tour in the rear, you'll notice that the rear door doesn't come all the way to the seat back. That means this rear seat is a little bit larger than it looks on the outside. This plastic that makes up the doors and portions of the dashboard is actually a natural fiber that is injection molded with the plastic to create these door panels. The fiber that's used is called neef. It's a kind of a jute or a hemp product. You can see it's mixed with the plastic and then injection molded into these shapes on the doors and on the dashboard. If you're a big fan of listening to tunes in your car, you need to know that there is definitely something missing in the rear compartment of our base model, and that is speakers of any description. In fact, there are only 4 speakers in the base model i3, and they're all up front. The optional $800 Harman Kardon system raises this total to 10 speakers with 7 channels of audio. It's a significant improvement over this base model. Up front, we have fixed headrests and fixed shoulder belts for both the driver and the front passenger. You'll notice that the seatbelt is actually on the B-pillar, which is part of that suicide door. This chrome handle right here is the door latch for that rear door. The front door looks very similar to the rear door. We again have that natural fiber and polymer injection molded body to the door. Hard plastics in this tan portion right down here. In front of the door release, we see one of the 4 speaker grills in this car. The other one is actually down here in the kick panel in the driver and front passenger footwell area. Moving over to the dashboard, we have soft touch injection molded plastics in this tan portion right here and right down here. The bulk of the dashboard, as you can see, is that same injection molded plastic right up there. The glove compartment lid can be either plastic, as in our base model, or an optional eucalyptus wood that is very attractive. The glove box opens up and it's an awful lot deeper than it looks. You can really put quite a lot inside that glove compartment. It doesn't open from the front like a traditional glove box. That does limit some of the things you can stuff in here, but I was able to fit an iPad inside. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, you'll see the Idrive infotainment and navigation screen. Our particular model has the base screen, so there is an optional up-level one that does come with one of the packages available in the i3. Definitely an option that I would get. The base system still offers you radio, navigation, and Bluetooth integration. This whole screen floats on this arm that is connected over there on the passenger side, so you can actually stick your hand completely around that display. This bin right in here can also be eucalyptus wood if you choose that option. Below the bin and the screen, we find the radio controls as well as the controls for the standard single-zone automatic climate control. We have our heated seat buttons on the left and on the right here. Heating the seats is much more efficient than heating the air, so keep that in mind for maximum range. Up here you'll find a dedicated mode button, volume and power button, band button. These are preset buttons and they're also touch sensitive, so they can be set to several different functions in the vehicle's iDrive system, not just radio presets. If you hover your finger over this button, the screen will actually tell you what it's set to. Track forward and backward buttons right over here. Below the air vents, you'll see one of the main benefits of the drivetrain layout in the i3. We have essentially nothing going on right here between the driver and the passenger footwell areas. That makes the passenger compartment look much more spacious. There is a little cargo net right here for small knickknacks, and you will find a 12-volt power outlet right under this portion of the dashboard. We have 2 cup holders right here. These were capable of accommodating large takeout sodas right like this one. And the front cup holder can actually be swiveled slightly, so it can be pulled out. It has a little tab right there, and then you can lock it into 3 positions: passenger side, driver side, or right there in the middle. Below that we have our drive mode selector. Comfort, Eco Pro, and Eco Pro Plus are selectable via this. That changes the way the drive system in the i3 behaves. If you put it into Eco Pro, top speed is limited to 75 unless you really press hard on the accelerator pedal, and in Eco Pro Plus mode it's limited to 56 miles an hour unless again you press hard on the accelerator pedal. To the right of that we have our iDrive controller, and you may notice this looks like the last generation of iDrive controller. That's because it is. If you do get the optional up-level iDrive system, that does get the larger iDrive control wheel with finger writing recognition. Behind the iDrive controller we have a small palm rest, the electronic parking brake, and then we have a softly padded center armrest. This does open to reveal a small storage cubby right here. It's also height adjustable, and then you can open it completely to reveal this bin right down here. This bin does not have a lid, but this is where you'll find the USB input and the auxiliary input. In addition to those 2 inputs, we also have a 12-volt power outlet and a little holder for this cup holder, so you can actually jam it right in there. This cup holder has an insertable and removable divider, so you can put phones or other knickknacks in the cup holder. On the driver's side, we have this very unusual and modern-looking shifter. It's attached to the steering column, but it doesn't rotate with the steering wheel. This is the shift knob right up here: drive, reverse, neutral, park button right up there on top, and then the start button to start and stop the vehicle is right over here. I found that you have to resist the impulse to use your finger to push the start-stop button because there really isn't enough room here between this shifter and the steering wheel, or to stab it through the steering wheel like that. You really just want to grab onto the shifter, use your thumb there, and then rotate the shifter around to drive. On top of the steering column, we have this small LCD instrument cluster. It's not really part of the dashboard, and it doesn't have its own binnacle. This LCD is a little bit smaller than I thought it would be, given everything else going on in the i3 that is ultra modern. In the lower left, we have our fuel gauge. Keep in mind this only has 1.9 gallons of total capacity for gasoline. On the lower right, we have our battery gauge up to about 70 miles for this plug-in range extending model. Trip computer right up there on the upper right. We have our charge and power gauge right there in the middle. That little sort of piano key that is white right now will move to the left or to the right depending on how much you're pressing on the accelerator pedal or how much you're pressing on the brake pedal. Digital speedometer right up there up top. Zooming out to the steering wheel, our particular model has this blue band that runs right through here. There are a few different trims available. Ours is a two-tone steering wheel with this ivory and the black 2 spokes. If we turn the steering wheel, you can see our shifter over here, and then we also have the windshield wiper stalk on this side right below it. On the left side of the steering wheel, we have our turn signal stalk, and then the BC button right here at the end is what cycles through the trip computer options on that display. The big thing you need to know about the i3 with the range extender is that there will be times out on the road where you only have about 30 horsepower to propel you forward. Your average driving situations, even on highways or up relatively steep grades, it wasn't too much of a problem unless you need to sustain high speeds on those steep grades. With the cruise control set to 73 miles per hour, I had no problem maintaining that on Interstate 280 in the San Francisco Bay Area, even though it is a freeway through rolling foothills at high speed. Out on these winding mountain highways that we're driving on right here, this vehicle has absolutely no problem maintaining the appropriate battery charge because we're never really going that far beyond the average of a 30 horsepower demand. That average really is important because the electric generator is continually pumping about 30 horsepower, 34 horsepower of power back into the battery, whether you're stopping or you're going or not, right up until the point where that battery hits about 5 to 6% charge, and that's where it stops. That really is enough for most driving circumstances. That means that even when we're in this range extending mode, we still have 170 horsepower on tap in most situations. Now, the closer the battery gets towards the end, the lower that power figure runs until you hit right around that 30 horsepower mark. With 170 horsepower on tap, we ran from 0 to 60 in 7 seconds flat in this vehicle. It's a little bit faster if you get the EV only version because we have less weight. That means I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points when it comes to acceleration. There really aren't very many EVs that are faster than this. You're pretty much going to have to shop for a Tesla if you want something sportier than the i3, or BMW's own i8. Cadillac's ELR is right about the same, even though it has more power, and that's because it is heavier. When it comes to the ride, I'm going to give this 7 out of 10 points. We do have those standard 19 or optional 20-inch wheels and tires in this vehicle. That does drop the ride just a little bit. These tires are also really narrow, and that is something you'll definitely notice out on the road. Overall, I'm going to give handling 7 out of 10 points. It's not as bad as I thought it would be with what look like bicycle tires, but this vehicle is again very light, and that really does help with the handling. I rate this about the same as the Ford Focus EV, which is one of the better handling vehicles in this segment. That Focus EV is actually heavier than this, as is the Nissan Leaf. The stability control system is very aggressive out on the roads to help keep you shiny side up, but this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle and it does feel like it. You don't get torque steer, you don't have that heavy steering feel that you get in a front-wheel drive vehicle. We also don't get that plowing in the corners that you get with a front-wheel drive vehicle or a front-biased vehicle because we have 55% of the weight in the rear, so this actually is a little bit lighter up front. And that's how they can get away with the narrower tires in the front. Now that we're at the stop sign, the range extender has actually turned off. As I start going, it'll turn itself back on. Now if the battery was really depleted, it would actually stay going to keep charging the engine. It kind of sounds like there's a motorcycle hanging out right in your left quarter panel. Cabin noise comes in at 7 out of 10 points. I scored 69 decibels at 50 miles an hour in EV only mode. That jumps up to 71 if you do have the range extender going and you're traveling at a steady 50 miles an hour. Obviously, the faster you go, the louder it is, and at higher speeds especially, this is louder than most of the other BMW models. Something like a BMW 320i is definitely quieter than this. I'm going to give braking 6 out of 10 points for 2 reasons. The first is this relatively touchy accelerator pedal. And I know that sounds strange, but the accelerator pedal functions as both an accelerator and a brake pedal in many ways in this vehicle. It's part of BMW's one-pedal concept, where you can drive the vehicle using only the accelerator pedal. So we're driving along right now using the accelerator pedal. If I lift my foot off the accelerator pedal, it will actually brake to a complete stop. And you can see it's doing this quite rapidly, and I don't have my foot on the brake pedal. And it will actually stop and hold the stop with your foot off of the accelerator pedal, off of the brake pedal. That makes it a little easier to drive in stop-and-go traffic and in heavy traffic especially, but in moderate traffic or in traffic that's ranging from speeds to say 70 to 75 miles an hour back and forth in sort of extra urban traffic, it is a little bit more difficult because there is no coast mode in this vehicle unless you shift the transmission to neutral. The other thing we don't have is a hold mode like the Volt or the Cadillac Elr. That's something that you get in Europe, but you do not get in the United States. So European models of the i3, you can go into Idrive, and as long as the battery is less than 75% charged, you can actually turn on the range extender. That limitation is important because, as I said, there are going to be certain circumstances where you only have 30 to 34 horsepower left. I did experience it very deliberately. I decided not to charge it this morning, and then I went on a round trip from Santa Cruz to Burlingame and then back again without charging the vehicle. On my way to Burlingame, I had absolutely no problem on Interstate 280, again with the cruise control set to about 73 miles an hour, but I was able to finally experience it on a long uphill slope if I really beat the engine. It took a concerted effort, but I did end up slowing down to about 56 miles an hour. It wasn't abrupt at all. That's really the thing that I was worried about initially with the i3, was that, what does this thing feel like when it goes from 170 horsepower to 30 horsepower? Is it this brick wall that you hit? And it really isn't. It actually took about 1.5 miles for me to slow down to about 56 miles an hour. I did have to go to a quite naughty speed, which I will not mention in this video for certain reasons, but safe to say it was well over the speed limit that I had to go to in order to get the battery to zero. And then it took about 1.5 miles for me to slow down to about 55, 56 miles an hour when I crested a hill, and then all was well again. Driving absolutely legal speeds, it turned out to not be a problem at all, even though BMW was really cagey on that answer and they were implying that about 50 miles an hour was as fast as you could go. It turns out that BMW is as conservative with that figure as they are with their 0 to 60 times. When it comes to fuel economy, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points, even though we only got 40 miles per gallon when we're driving around with the gasoline engine running. That's because even in EV mode, and even in this heavier model that has the range extender, we're still getting excellent fuel economy in terms of EVs. We've been averaging about 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is relatively good for a vehicle like this. You'll notice that it's considerably more efficient than a Tesla or a Cadillac Elr or a Chevy Volt. The only real downside to the i3 is this incredibly small gas tank. That was another concession for getting it classified the way they did in California, we're told. Now with 1.9 gallons of gasoline, you can really safely get about 60 miles out of this tank. The tricky bit with that, of course, is that since the range extender kicks in when the battery is almost at zero, you don't really want to get the gas tank to zero as well, because you won't really have any battery to help you get to the gas station. In Europe, you don't have this problem, because you could tell the vehicle to hold the battery power at, say, 50%, and then you can use all the gasoline that you've got, and then you could let it use the battery again to get you to the next gas station and be just a little bit more secure, a little bit safer. You can't do that in the US, so your actual range really is dependent on how fine you want to cut it. Very much like those other plug-in hybrids out there, however, this vehicle could go from San Francisco to Los Angeles as long as you're willing to stop every 60 miles to fill it with gas. Pricing for the i3 is uncharacteristically simple for BMW. Things start out at $42,400 for the EV model, $46,250 for the one with the range extender right like this. Keep in mind that you may be eligible for tax credits up to $10,000. That's combined federal and state tax credits. Now you want to make sure you check with a tax professional before you depend on those credits. There are 3 different trim levels for the i3. We're taking a look at the base trim, which is the Mega trim. For $1,500 you can get Giga, and for $2,500 you can get Terra. Different options are included in those packages as standard, but if you want leather seats, you'll have to jump on up to that Terra model. Pricing is relatively simple in the i3 because we don't have as many standalone options as you'll find in the rest of the BMW lineup. I have 3 must-have options, and they're basically the only 3 options available in the United States. The Harman Kardon sound system is $800. It's definitely an option that I would get. The bass audio system in the i3 is by no means bad, but neither is it any more impressive than your average bass mid-size sedan in America. But if you get that $800 Harman Kardon sound system, it really sounds like your average BMW. There's also a $2,500 tech package, which gives you BMW's radar adaptive cruise control system with collision warning. We also get an up-level nav system with a wider screen and better software. With that, we also get BMW's smartphone app integration, which is one of the best in the industry, as well as a finger writing recognition pad on the Idrive controller. I would probably also get the $1,000 parking package, which includes a self-parking system as well as a backup camera that we don't have in this model. As I said earlier, the most direct competition is most likely the Mercedes-Benz B-Class Electric. We get a similar amount of power underneath the hood. It's also a very similar brand. However, that B-Class is not a dedicated EV like this. It wasn't engineered from the ground up to be ultralight and an EV, and it really shows, because even though we have the same amount of power, it's a little bit slower, and it's not as economical in terms of power used for miles driven. The B-Class is definitely more traditional in terms of styling inside and out. I don't really think that's either a pro or a con. I think that's really a personal preference. Handling in the B-Class is excellent, and in certain situations it may be even a little bit better than the i3, but the i3 does very well for itself thanks to its low curb weight and its excellent weight balance. The EV is a nearly 50-50 weight balanced vehicle, and this is about 55% in the rear, not 55% in the front like you find with many EVs out there. Lastly, we don't get the option of DC quick charging in that Mercedes-Benz, so you don't have the option of finding one of those quick charge stations and topping off for 20 minutes to get an 80% charge. The rest of the competition is a little bit tricky to compare. We have the Cadillac Elr at $75,000. That's almost double a base i3. It's also a two-door hybrid vehicle, not an EV like you find in the base version of the i3. The Elr, of course, has a much bigger gas tank, and when you're running it in hybrid mode, it's actually faster than when it's running in EV-only mode. The goal of the two vehicles is very different. General Motors likes to call it the EV when you want it and the hybrid when you need it concept, and that is quite true with the Elr, but it's not true of the i3. The i3's concept is the EV all the time, but then it has that range extender when you have an emergency or when you need to go beyond that regular range. It's not really designed to be the kind of vehicle that you're driving on gasoline all the time. The Elr isn't necessarily faster than the i3 because it is a decent amount heavier, however, it certainly handles better. Even though I don't really think they're the same kind of vehicle, everybody wants me to compare the i3 to the Tesla, so here we go. The Tesla is a much more traditionally shaped vehicle. You'll notice it looks really sexy, but it also looks very much like every other car out on the road in terms of general form, general shape. Everything is more rounded off, more aerodynamic, but the general shape of the car really isn't thinking that far outside the box. The i3 definitely is thinking outside the box. The Tesla is obviously bigger, and it obviously has a much longer range. You can go about 300 miles on the top end trims if you treat it very, very gently. This vehicle, even if you treat it gently, you're not going to get 100 miles out of it. Now that said, if you get the range extender in this vehicle, you can go on longer distance trips if you really, really needed to, and you'd get there much sooner than you would in the Tesla, because the Tesla, every 200 to 300 miles, you would have to stop at a supercharging station and try and top your battery up to get onto the next supercharging station. This, you can fill it up at any old gas station. Your power, however, is going to be limited in that range extending mode. If you qualify for the maximum incentives, you can, in theory, buy an i3 for around $36,000 to $37,000. You can also lease them relatively inexpensively at the moment. That makes the i3 an interesting alternative to your average mid-size sedan as a commuter vehicle. You can, of course, drive this vehicle in the carpool lane in California and several other states, even if you get the range extended version, and that really will save you an awful lot of time, especially if you commute in the San Francisco Bay Area or the Los Angeles metro area, where traffic really is a problem, and those carpool lanes save you an awful lot of time. I expected to like the i3, but I didn't actually expect to like the i3 quite as much as I did. The i3 is cute, it's cheeky, it's fun, and the range extender works an awful lot better than I thought it would. I was one of those people that was really concerned about the i3 because of the way that BMW had to program the software in order to qualify as that range extended EV in California. It means that the battery has to go almost completely flat before they can engage that range extender mode, and that range extender isn't allowed to charge the battery more than about that 6%. If you're looking for a green commuter vehicle, you'd do well to put the 2015 BMW i3 on your shopping list. Just keep in mind that the range extending option is not really designed for people that never have the ability to charge. So if you live in some sort of condo or apartment complex and you do not have access to a charger at home or at work, this vehicle really isn't for you. Yes, it technically could work, but it's not really using the vehicle to the best of its abilities. If I were shopping for an EV today, the BMW i3 is definitely the one that I would buy because of that range extending option. It would give me that added security of being able to go from work to home or home to work and not worry about running out of power. And my commute really is at the limit of every other EV out there, and I generally worry about running out of power when I have to test one. Very much like the Volt, the Elr, or Ford's energy products, this doesn't give you the same kind of anxiety when the vehicle fails to charge either. I deliberately did not charge it at home last night to see how it would behave, and it was perfectly fine driving it to work. That's really the big difference between the i3 with and without the range extender. If you get the range extender, it's a little bit easier to integrate it to the average American family's single car lifestyle. If you're a multiple car family and you're really just looking at a commuter car and you never expect your car to go long distances, then the regular i3 would be the better choice. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. This has been the 2015 BMW i3 Range Extender. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You can also find me over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, over at Twitter as AlexandAutos, and I'll see you next week.